Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another video. Today I'm doing something a little bit different than my normal content. You know, I use YouTube to make videos, but I also use it to watch videos, especially from political creators. That's how I got into the market, um, and got into the sphere. And I watched a video a while back that I was recommended recently by Red Eagle Politics, talking about the 2008 election if Hillary Clinton were the nominee instead of Barack Obama. Now, the 2008 Democrat primary was very complex. There were a few shenanigans in Michigan and Florida, and across the board. It was a very brutal primary between Illinois Senator Barack Obama and New York Senator Hillary Clinton. Um, Obviously, Clinton being the former First Lady and Obama being a rising star black within the Democratic Party, the keynote speaker in the 2004 DNC. Now, it was pretty close, but Obama narrowly emerged ahead. But one, had Obama just not run, especially since when he ran, it seemed like he was going to get destroyed. Um, or two, had just a few voters in Iowa, New Hampshire, and the early states changed their minds, and Hillary Clinton's momentum been much higher than it was in our timeline, we could have seen a very different scenario. Now, Red Eagle, he's weird politically, and I won't say I agree with him on everything, especially back then. He was much more libertarian, but I think I agree with him. In this sympathizing with 2008 Hillary Clinton. We've even seen this through some clips of Hillary Clinton in 2008 during the campaign that Trump has posted. This was a very different Hillary Clinton than the one we saw challenge Trump in 2016. And even in 2016, a lot of the realignment was because Hillary Clinton took traditionally considered conservative stances, and even some populist stances, like her opposition to the Trans Pacific Partnership. There were quite a few people who rated her as more economically conservative than Donald Trump, which partially contributed to his win, but especially in 2008, Hillary Clinton on issues like immigration, on social issues. Like, this was the same year in the general election with Obama on the ballot, mind you, that California not just voted to protect their ban on same sex marriage, but voted to go and invalidate the previously issued same sex marriage licenses throughout the state. Like, it was close, but at the same time, it was California, and California voted against same sex marriage. Like, this was a different United States, and Hillary Clinton was a much, much more liberal president that, or Obama was a much, much more liberal president than Hillary Clinton would have been. Hillary Clinton definitely would have had a lot more appeal to the South. And you even saw this in 2016. 2020, you have some states shifted right. California, I think New York got pretty close. But California was LA. Um, and now that narrowed. But and Florida as well. But one of the weird ones was Arkansas. I think that's just because Hillary had a home state balance, because you didn't see Arkansas trend like radically to the right of the environment this time around. So she did have some appeal there. And in 2008, Hillary Clinton really doesn't have any scandals to attack her on. She's not that unpopular. She's not associated with Obama. She's just a conservative Democrat running right after Republicans are completely unpopular. A much better candidate than um, Obama or McCain. I think she can definitely exploit a lot of McCain's weaknesses, especially with the base. So I'm going to be filling this out, and we're going to also be filling out some more maps. Maybe not all today, but if you guys like this type of video, make sure to subscribe down below. Tell me in the comments whether you think Hillary Clinton being elected in 2008 would end up as a better scenario for 2024, especially when we're done with all this, than had Obama, or than our timeline where Obama won. So first of all, I think Hillary Clinton wins a lot of these safe Democrat states in a landslide. I think she has a lot more Rust Belt appeal than Obama, who already had a shit ton of Rust Belt appeal. Um, Even states like Maryland, which could be somewhat competitive, in New Jersey, which was actually closer than expected in 2004. She wins by quite a bit. All of Maine, I think she wins. New Hampshire, she also wins by a large amount. Wisconsin and Michigan, much bluer back then, um, especially for these presidential elections. And also Iowa. a lot of these states you see her do even better in the rural areas than Obama did. And Obama already did pretty damn good in the rural areas of these states. I also think in the working class areas of Pennsylvania, she'd do pretty phenomenal. And in New Mexico, I think that she would end up winning the state by over 10. I'm gonna say that's it for now. Um, Perhaps you can make an argument. I think we'll throw Nevada in, which already makes it 269 for her. But she's just a better candidate than Obama. Obama was a pretty radical candidate for 2008. Um, People think of him as like this young, charismatic candidate, but like at the same time, especially with McCain, a lot of his surrogates running a very negative campaign against him. We saw this in 2024, but like especially elderly people got pretty spooked about Obama. That's why a lot of his campaign focus was on the internet, where he could court youth voters, because like he was going to lose among older voters no matter what, even with Bush being in everyone's mind. So Hillary Clinton really stops that bleeding. There's things you can attack her on, especially carpetbagging, but like when an issue that really would only move the needle in two states, New York and Arkansas, which if McCain wants a chance of winning, he's going to have to be winning Arkansas by a shit ton. When that's your only attack against her, like it's not going to end too well. The safe states for McCain, I think we got Idaho, Wyoming, Nebraska's third, and at this time, probably Nebraska's first as well, along with Nebraska at large. You really don't see the suburban trends. You see in 2024 in Nebraska, which would make it at all competitive. And even so, Nebraska wasn't that competitive, especially with 1-5-10 margins. But I think McCain would do decently enough to at least hold these four electoral votes by over 10%. Oklahoma, I'd say Kansas. It depends on who Hillary Clinton picks as VP. I think she'd pick Bai as VP. I think that's kind of the consensus. But there's an incumbent governor of Kansas that's a Democrat. If she picks her as her VP, which an all female ticket would be a little bit weird for 2008. It'd even be a little bit weird now. But I'd say she'd probably make Kansas competitive in that scenario. Utah is safe. I'm going to assume in Alaska, we still have Palin as the VP nominee. She did actually raise the ticket a lot in Alaska. If McCain doesn't pick Palin in this scenario, I don't know, maybe to appeal to moderates more, especially since Hillary Clinton's pretty conservative. He's getting his ass handed to him. We have Alabama, Tennessee, Mississippi, Texas. I think at this time just can't flip. Republicans do way too well in the suburbs of Texas, and that is it. McCain is not even at 100 electoral votes, and once we add the likely states of Virginia, Hillary Clinton wins. Wow, what a surprise. Ohio, Colorado, and Missouri. It's already looking bad. Now, Missouri was a McCain state, but I think in this scenario, Hillary Clinton probably runs about even with Obama in the suburbs. She could potentially even do better if you have a lot of moderates who are panicked about Obama. But I think you see a lot of people in the rural areas turn out for Hillary Clinton that didn't turn out for Obama. Now, you could make race an issue of that. Perhaps they were racist. But I also think at the same time, like Obama was just not an appealing candidate to rule America. Obviously, it's good in like northeastern Ohio, but like that's a solid Democrat area. Congrats. He might have even underran Kerry in some of these counties across the nation. Like you can see pretty easily. You see Arizona shifted right. Wow, McCain was the nominee, but you also saw a lot of rural counties in West Virginia, Kentucky, Arkansas shifted right, which I don't think they shift right against Hillary Clinton either. I also think she wins Florida by a likely margin. She had okay appeal with Hispanics in 2016. I think part of that was Trump not being very appealing to them, but I also do think that she would have some minority appeal, especially amongst Hispanics. And in traditionally Democrat working class areas like Volusia County, which we even saw in the special election this year, revert a little bit. I think she'd do pretty good there. Now the margins in the rural areas of Florida, plus once again she'd do better among older voters. So I think she ends up winning Florida by like 6 to 7%. Um, as for likely for McCain, I mean, I think Arizona, he has a lot of appeal to his home state, especially the suburban areas like Maricopa County, not Macomb County. That's in a safe Democrat state, which is insane. Um, I think he'd do pretty good there and hold up relatively well in comparison. South Carolina, it's just too red of a state. Like, the Senate election could be pretty damn competitive since Democrats actually ran someone to the probably to the right. You could debate it like in today's political spectrum of like populism versus establishmentarianism, kind of. He'd be more populist than Lindsey Graham, but Democrats ran someone who was like pretty conservative in South Carolina, so I think they could give Republicans a run for their money, especially if Hillary Clinton does better there. Um, puts up a well enough performance for him to overperform her by, but I still think it stays in Republican hands. Overall, you see Democrats gain more seats in the Senate, which means they don't have to rely on Specter switching seats, switching parties in Pennsylvania to get the 60 seats for a supermajority. I mean, I think North Dakota, and I guess I don't think South Dakota. I think we'll leave that one off. But North Dakota was kind of considered competitive during the campaign. That was mostly a few bullshit polls. South Dakota was actually closer, but the Dakotas were relatively close for Obama, and I think Hillary Clinton would do better in the rural areas. I think North Dakota probably ends up a tiny bit over 5%, just because, I mean, it's North Dakota. It's going to be very hard to win. But South Dakota has a lot more urban areas and even more natives. And I think South Dakota would be more susceptible to a lot of areas voting for Democrats. So we'll leave that off for now. As for leaning for Hillary Clinton, I think the first one was West Virginia. West Virginia is kind of an ancestrally Democrat state at this point. I mean, it's definitely ancestrally Democrat now in 2025, but even in 2008, it votes Republican for the presidency for the most part. But I think Hillary Clinton, especially with the Clinton last name, would have a lot of appeal to registered Democrats and independents here who voted for Bush in a way that Obama didn't. Partially, yes, race, but also partially he just didn't have appeal to coal country. I think she'd have a lot more appeal here, even though she is a woman, because I don't think it's the sexist, racist issue. I think she's a lot more conservative on these issues. She'd do a lot better in the rural areas. And even the areas that voted for Joe Manchin in 2018 would turn out enough for her to make it a lean Democrat state. Same thing with North Carolina. Obama did have some unique appeal here with black voters, which is why I think she does better in West Virginia, Missouri to some extent, Florida, um, Colorado. There's not really too many African Americans here. North Carolina, there are a lot of African Americans, but I think she makes it up in the rural areas of the state. If you can narrow the rural areas and the suburban, exurban, rural areas of the state, you can do pretty good. And like Obama did relatively good in the rural areas, like Robeson County, which is a Robinson plus 10 county, ended up voting for Obama in 2012 and voting for him in a landslide here. But I think she does even better. Um, Perhaps her suburban marches are on par. Urban marches a little bit below, but I think she still wins the state by like 1 to 2%. I think she wins her home state of Arkansas by a slimmer margin. John McCain was not popular in these areas, so I really don't think his campaign does well. Actually, wait, shit, I made a mistake. I'm retarded. Ignore that I put Tennessee as safe Republican. That might have even been a misclick. Um, I can actually explain why it's an election item. Doing an election night, I shouldn't have spoiled that. But Alabama, Mississippi, and Tennessee were called at the same time in 2024, so they associate in my head. But Arkansas, she has a lot of appeal to her home state. Plus, it's somewhat black, but at the same time, you win it through the rural areas. Kind of like a Blanche Lincoln, who I think she's the one on the same. It might be Pryor, who's on the same ballot as Obama. Actually, I think it is Pryor. Um, like a Mark Pryor coalition of like doing better in the rural areas, winning a lot of these rural counties, especially in the eastern portion of the state. Um, Maybe not doing too good in like the northeast or northwestern portion of the state, which is pretty ancestrally Republican, even for a kind of toss-up state at this point, but doing well enough along the coast with black voters and in the rural areas, kind of adjacent to the coast, um, which have a lot of ancestral Democrats, and in the Fayette area, doing fine. So I think she ends up winning Arkansas by like 2 to 3 points. I'm also going to throw in Nebraska second. Nebraska second did not respond at all well to the Great Recession. And it was one of the few suburban areas that were like heavily Republican that voted Democrat in this election, kind of out of nowhere. And I think it happens in a similar way for Hillary Clinton. I think Obama would have the slight edge in terms of appeal here. I'm actually not exactly sure how much he won it by. I think it was like 4 to 5%. But I think Hillary Clinton underruns him, but still ends up winning this district just because you have the Great Recession on people's minds, and that does hurt Democrats a little bit here. I'm also going to throw in Montana, just because Montana was relative. It was like pretty close for a heavily Bush state in 2008, and I think she'd have a lot more appeal to the rural areas compared to Obama, even though Obama did have some appeal there. Um, and if you narrow the rural areas enough in Montana, kind of get like a Bill Clinton 1992 coalition. Funny because Clinton, Hillary, Bill, but you do that, and I think you end up winning Montana. And as for leaning John McCain, I think South Dakota. Like I said, I think it'd be a bit closer than North Dakota. So I don't see Hillary Clinton winning it, and she isn't particularly close here. But especially in, I think it's I forget what the major city in. I think it's Sioux Falls or Sioux City, right here along the northwestern. My mind is messed up. Northwestern corner of Iowa, but there's a major city here that I'm completely forgetting. Because I'm thinking of the county instead of the city name. I don't know what it is. I'm sorry. Um, but she does good there, and she narrows the rural areas enough. To do okay. She also gets her decent support among Indians in the state on the reservations, but I don't think it's enough to win the state. But she gets it fairly close. Georgia as well. The state just really isn't ready to flip. It went to Bill Clinton in 1992. Part of that was Ross. I think that was one of the states you can definitely chalk up to Ross Perot. And Clinton doesn't have that going for her. The suburbs are a bit more Democrat at this point. It's really 2012. And of course 2016, where they start to turn a corner. But 2012, you can see a lot of the South, and especially the Georgia suburbs, shift towards Obama a lot because black voters were particularly energized for that 2012 campaign. And you start to see the demographic change in Georgia to the point where it was even considered competitive in the red wave of 2014 for Senate and for governor. Kind of wrongly so, but still Georgia trends really began in 2012, and I think Hillary Clinton would do relatively well in the rural areas. She might even carry Democrats in the Senate race so that it doesn't go to a runoff, but I don't think she'd be able to narrow the Republican margins enough in the suburbs. Those would just trump any margins she put up in, like Fulton, DeKalb, or the rural areas. It'd be a very hard state for her to win. Um, I'm also going to put Tennessee here. Tennessee, it was relatively close for Senate in 2006. 2006 is one of those weird midterms in which it's a massive, massive blue wave, but it's not the high watermark. Democrats still, obviously, they net Senate seats, different class Senate, but they also net House seats. In 2008, do even better. So you could make a case for it, but I just think Tennessee, it's a narrow, narrow Bill Clinton state. And it's becoming more of the deep south at this point. Um, the rural areas, if they didn't respond well for I forget his name, but he's actually a Fox News co-host now in 2006, it's going to be hard for them to vote for any Democrat. I think with full turnout, you just have the rural areas put up too decent of a margin for Clinton to overcome. So we have the tilt states here. The first tilt state is Indiana. I think Clinton replicates Obama's pretty uh, insane win in Indiana. The state wasn't even considered competitive, but Indiana was like completely cratered in by the Great Recession. Especially Indiana was the hardest hit, and I just think it's pretty inevitable that the state flips Democrat here. Especially if Hillary Clinton's going to be posting better margins in the rural areas than Obama. Yes, maybe she falls behind in Indianapolis. I don't know why I pronounced that so weird, but Indianapolis, Gary. But like at some point, she's doing well enough in the rural areas. She's going to win the state. My bad. Get used to that. It's going to happen for a few more videos. Louisiana also. This is a hard one. I think she narrowly ends up winning it. Just because Louisiana, you have like the suburban areas around New Orleans at this point, and like the very far rural areas, like bordering Texas, bordering the Gulf of Mexico, bordering Mississippi to some extent. Obviously, have the Black Belt here, but like other than that, Central Louisiana was pretty ancestrally Democrat. Um, And I think it would turn out for Hillary Clinton enough. She'd post good enough margins in New Orleans and Baton Rouge, I think is what it's called. I can't pronounce U.S. cities, especially in these states that aren't that important for modern politics. My geography is a bit poor. Jesus Christ. I'm breaking into a fit. Just let me finish this map. But we finished with Kentucky, and I think it'd be a bit too hard. For her to end up winning. It was even narrower in 1996. I do think coal country in Kentucky would be much more receptive to Hillary Clinton's messaging. In coal country in Tennessee, because Kentucky coal country was much more ancestry Democrat than really anything in Tennessee. I just think you have a certain level of suburban margins that Republicans are going to get around Louisville and Lexington, and especially the western portion really doesn't budge for Democrats. Like, even Andy Bashir did pretty bad in that area, so I think she'd narrowly lose the state, which means 399 to 139. So, anyways, we move on to 2012. So, 2012, I think Democrats are much more conservative, seeing as the 2010 wave, which wiped out a lot of the Southern Democrats. It happens. There's a wave against Clinton and Democrats, but it happens more on a local basis where, like, even if you're in a safe Democrat seat in the North, if you're a bad candidate, you lose. Um, Instead of just like, if you're in a McCain seat or a now Obama seat in the South, like, good fucking luck. And I don't think you see as much anti incumbency. Where, like, there's a seat in West Virginia where the incumbent Democrat representative was primaried out. You think, oh, midterms, incumbency is a big thing. That actually helped the Democrat who primaried him out. Um, the fact that he was not an incumbent. You don't see Obamacare pass. You don't see anything of the sort like that passed. And I think the GOP is just not as competent after, like, how deafening this was. Like, even Obama was relatively handicapped. Because you had the controversy over Minnesota, which stopped Democrats from winning that seat for a while, and then you had the Massachusetts special election, January 2010, if I'm not mistaken. So Obama really didn't have that much time with his supermajority. Hillary Clinton has like 63 Senate seats in this scenario, and even though she loses that in 2010, she has enough time to do kind of. She doesn't have as much opposition. Um, it's kind of it's a paradox. She doesn't do anything as big as Obama did with like the bare majority he needed, but also she has like even more seats. But I think because of that, Republicans nominated a slightly more liberal candidate than Romney, which ironically Romney was considered one of the conservative candidates in that race. I don't know how. He was like the kind of moderate establishmentarian because Santorum was more conservative, and Gingrich was a bit more liberal. But I still think, but the middle of the GOP is Newt Gingrich. At this point, it's much more of a suburban Big Tent, um, even establishmentarian coalition, kind of like stuck in the past with the Bushes and George H.W. Bush specifically, his coalition. So they're much more friendly to the suburbs. I really think that Hillary Clinton loses most of her suburban appeal, even more so than Obama. But at the same time, they really don't do as good in the rural areas. So I still think Hillary Clinton is the favorite for this election. You probably see a map like this where a lot of these seats are safe. I could see New Jersey being under 10. Um, on a good night for Gingrich, I think if Chris Christie were the nominee, he'd have a serious chance. Which I know I don't like Chris Christie either, but he would have been a formidable candidate um, for Democrats to go up against in 2012. I don't think he runs though in this scenario, especially since it looks even bleaker than it did um, in 2011, and um, he still wants that nomination in 2016. So I think this is safe for Clinton. I think Gingrich does a lot better in the plains. Um, Doesn't win Nebraska second by 10, but Most of these states he wins by 10. He also does pretty good in the Deep South. Georgia, mostly it's just masking the eventual trends. And I think he about holds up even in the Georgia suburbs, since a lot of that was trends based on race rather than like your friendly white suburban wine bomb flipping to Biden or in this case Obama. It was mostly black people were moving in. I don't think he can do too much better in the suburbs then. But I think at the same time he repairs a lot of the margins in the rural areas and turn out in the urban areas down a little bit, so he wins that by a safe margin. Same thing with Tennessee and Kentucky. Coal country really isn't the way it is. Um, 2008, there's not as much blowback. Plus, the suburbs go out in full force for Newt Gingrich against Hillary Clinton. So the map looks like this. Um, I think Hillary Clinton wins a lot of the Rust Belt by a likely margin. Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Iowa. I think by this time, New Hampshire's probably off the table. I mean, it's not as off the table as here. Actually, New Hampshire, if we're gonna go based on Democrats having more rules coalition than suburban friendly, New Hampshire wouldn't be off the table. I'm thinking of 2012 where it was like a 6-point Obama win. But I'd say Nevada. I don't think Republicans do well enough in the rural areas. Plus, Clark County is pretty solidly Democrat. Hillary Clinton has that Hispanic appeal to some extent, and you just can't run it up enough in Washoe as a Republican to get anywhere close to winning the state. So it ends up likely Democrat. It's a daunting map already, but Gingrich kind of holds it together. He wins Louisiana, West Virginia, Indiana by a likely margin. You don't see the complete reversal. Like Indiana, Louisiana, West Virginia, kind of all um, the 2008 Indianas of this timeline, where like it flips narrowly, but like it's bound to flip back here. She puts up a fight for them at least, but she doesn't really stand a chance at winning any of them. Uh, so I think that's it for like the Arizona also is likely Republican. That's not a flip, but like those three are insta flips for Gingrich, but they're not as much as you would want if you were Gingrich and you wanted to win nationwide. So it looks pretty bad in Alaska as well. Arizona and Alaska, you see, kind of without the home state bump. Especially in Alaska, where Palin, even though she was the VP, she impacted that a lot. I think even swung left in 2012, but you see a lot of that bump disappear, which hurts Republicans there, but they still end up winning all 14 electoral votes, which is one more than the 13 in 2008. So, I mean, that's really all you can hope for as a Republican. But Hillary Clinton wins the presidency when she wins Ohio by a lean margin, kind of like Obama. She does much better, especially in the Appalachian area, but she also underperforms in like Cincinnati. I mean, to some extent, Columbus, and Cleveland, maybe. She also does better in Northeastern Ohio. Like the suburbs go against her more than they went against Obama. But she does much better in the rural areas. I also think I think she narrowly wins Virginia by like 2 to 3%. I don't even know how much Obama won it by. It was not that much. Um, but I think she ends up narrowly winning Virginia just because she does well enough. In the rural areas, she doesn't like lose Loudoun County or anything. She holds up relatively well there. Um, so the state ends up going to her. Florida also, I think she does good with Hispanics, so she doesn't completely crater in that state, and she does well enough in places like Volusia, the rural areas, even some of the elderly areas, in a way that like Romney, he didn't do that good, but he at least did okay in Florida. I think she does slightly better and gets the state to over a 1% margin for her. But Gingrich is actually a really weird coalition. I think Nebraska second goes to him by a lead margin. It's kind of trending Democrat at this point, but he gets like one last hurrah out of the state. He also wins Colorado, which is, if I'm not mistaken, the first departure from the regular 2012. Um, I'm not. I know Colorado went to Obama, but I'm not sure if I put in Obama state as for Gingrich yet, or Clinton, or Romney state as for Clinton yet. But I just think you don't do well enough as a Democrat in the suburban areas, and whatever you make up in the rural areas really isn't enough. Kind of like the inverse of the problem Trump has in Colorado. You're going to be seeing that inverse a little bit more in this series when we get to the later elections. I was thinking North Carolina probably ends up leaning Republican. I just don't think Hillary Clinton has nearly as much rural appeal as in 2008. Plus, she does crater in areas with high black turnout, which you really don't see the black surge that you saw for Obama um, in 2012. Black turnout just kind of craters, and that hurts her in North Carolina a lot. Um, then tilting Democrat, I think Missouri. Missouri, I think will put as lean. Um, Yeah, that's a shift to right. That that's what I was thinking about with Colorado. But Missouri, I think we'll put as lean Democrat just because I think even one, it kind of stays as a bellwether in this scenario, and even though she underperforms in the suburbs, she does well enough in the rural areas um, of Missouri to scrape together like a 1 point win. It's definitely not anything impressive, but I mean compared to how Obama did in the state, it's pretty good. Um, But she ends up winning Missouri by like a pretty narrow margin, which means she can win Arkansas by a total margin, which means she's officially outperforming Obama's 332 electoral votes. I think it's her home state, and she holds together by the skin of her teeth in the state, just because I don't think Gingrich has that much appeal to Arkansas and Louisiana. Even Louisiana, deep south, I think Gingrich has appeal to. But I think even his moderate, like that's home region advantage, but like the idea of moderate republicanism really doesn't appeal to Arkansas. So I think she has one last hurrah out of Arkansas. But I think Gingrich ends up flipping New Hampshire because a lot of suburban areas that went for Clinton in 2008 end up revolting against her. Plus, it's a very anti-incumbent state. And I think being moderate helps Gingrich a lot in this state. So a very weird map, but a fun map nonetheless. And then we move to 2016. I mean, I debated the feasibility of this, but I felt Donald Trump one never switches parties because he never has the falling out with Obama that he did. Because him and Clinton were actually pretty good friends, and two, I just thought it'd be fun. Have Donald Trump in this scenario, and it kind of makes sense. Once again, they're friends. He's a Democrat. There's probably still going to be that same dissatisfaction with the establishment to some extent. I think I could see Christie being the nominee if he runs, but I don't think, or if he runs a good campaign, I'm not sure he ends up doing that. I think it comes down to since I think the GOP is way too liberal for Cruz to have any chance at winning like 50% of the GOP primary voters. It comes down to Rubio and some other opposition like Walker, Bush. I just think Rubio's a better slated liberal Republican to win this nomination. This is 2016 Rubio, not like 2025 Rubio. Uh, so I think Trump, I mean, like most of the elections, goes as the disfavorite. Uh, it's a much more Democrat America. I think Rubio's seen as the favorite going in. He wins a lot of these plain states and Texas. The Deep South ends up supporting him. Uh, Georgia, I think you also don't see the black trends, um, just because I don't think he does good with suburbanites whatsoever. Alaska, Arkansas, to some extent Colorado. No, we'll lay off Colorado because I think Colorado would be completely against him. Um, and I guess Arkansas, I don't think the appeal from Hillary Clinton carries over to Donald Trump. End of safe Republican. That's it for safe Republican, safe Democrat. He uh he does relatively well. Oh, I should have put Oregon as likely. My bad. He does relatively well, like the traditional Democrat areas that are safe. The Rust Belt as well. I don't know if he outperforms Clinton. Maybe in Wisconsin because I feel like he'd get like Obama 2008 or even in this hypothetical Clinton 2008 margins of the rural areas, even though he craters and wow and like Waukesha is like 75% Republican in this scenario. But I think he does relatively well in the Rust Belt and in like the not really that competitive uh, areas of the Eastern Seaboard. He ends up winning. I think Maine also he wins by a safe margin. Maine just really isn't that competitive in this scenario. So he ends up with a narrow electoral vote lead, but like Rubio, he ends up winning Colorado. Um, Probably North Carolina as well. There's a lot of suburbs in North Carolina. I just don't think Trump would do well in them whatsoever. The suburbs are integral to winning the state. I also think Florida in this scenario, Trump doesn't have appeal to Hispanics, and Rubio is the incumbent senator from Florida. So I don't think Florida is particularly competitive. Um, in this scenario, Nebraska's second is also likely Republican. I just don't think that Trump would have appeal to suburbanites here, and that inevitable trend here is kind of bucked. Um, Kind of like if you ever heard of the emerging Democrat majority, which was a book written like 2013 talking about how Democrats would win the presidency forever. Um, or actually, it might have been earlier, uh, before Bush was elected. I'm not sure, but it was disproven by a Republican winning the presidency like 2 years later. Kind of like that, um, where they had like the inevitable Democrat trends in West Virginia, and Missouri, and then those areas didn't trend Democrat at all. In fact, they reverted. But I think Trump probably ends up winning Pennsylvania by a lean margin or likely margin. My bad, I'm confusing. New Jersey as well. Though I do think suburbanites, especially in places like Morris County, end up going against him. The state becomes more close than you'd be comfortable with. Uh, Iowa also, I think he relatively holds Clinton's margin just because he does that well in the rural areas. Um, And that's probably it for the likely states. I mean, I think he does okay with the white working class, but like not nearly as much as he could be doing. And you don't see it completely in places like Pennsylvania. You see it in Iowa, Pennsylvania, but not really New Jersey. So these states are narrower than you'd be comfortable with. Rubio has a lot of Hispanic appeal, though. Something ends up winning New Mexico, or Nevada, and New Mexico by a lean margin. Probably Virginia as well. I could see him winning. Um, it's a very suburban state. I don't think Trump doing better in Appalachia, since he probably holds Clinton's margins, would be able to starve off the or stave off the Republican trends in places like Nova, Hampton Roads. So I think Rubio ends up narrowly winning the state. Uh, I'd say that's it for the lean, or New Hampshire as well. I think would end up leaning towards Rubio. Uh, in this scenario, I just think it'd be a very hard state for Trump to end up winning. Very suburban, very anti-incumbent, two things that don't help him. But I think he ends up winning Ohio by a lean margin. And I think that's it for now. Or Oregon as well. Oregon narrows up a lot. It narrows in the scenario just because the suburbs swing against Republicans. But like you see, the Portland suburbs really revolt against Republicans in this scenario, or against Democrats in the scenario. I keep getting them confused because Trump's a Democrat. The rural areas turn out for Republicans, but you see Portland and some of these urban county margins barely hold it together for him. In Ohio, you also see him maybe even do better than Hillary Clinton in some of these rural white working class areas. Um, and his urban margins are enough to carry the state for him. And I think he wins Missouri by a pretty slim margin, the tipping point state, pulling off a rather. It's not as big of an upset as 2016. Um, I don't think he's nearly as scandalous in this scenario. I just don't think Republicans have the establishmentarian support as a party yet to have any of that stuff leak during the election. Plus, I don't think he's as radical um, of a departure from the Republican base. Like Romney to Trump is a much, much bigger leap than Clinton to Trump. Like it's at least kind of serviceable, even though it definitely pisses off a lot of establishmentarian Democrats. But I think you don't really see that dip into support until 2020, which I picked Susan Collins because she's pretty liberal for a Republican. And I think she'd be a good candidate here. But Donald Trump serves 4 years. He's not that popular. Um, I don't know if COVID happens in this scenario. Nebraska's second is safe Republican somehow. Um, but I think Trump, like he doesn't have too great of a term, or too great of a term, or too great of a time running for reelection. Uh, I'm trying to think. Indiana, probably. I'm trying to think if he has like too many. offensive opportunities. I think of changing it to that, but I'm not sure. I'd say Louisiana, Arkansas, probably safe. Georgia, by now it's becoming more black, so I wouldn't say it's safe. Um, West Virginia would be safe at this point. Um, and Colorado probably would also be safe. Uh, Here, I just don't think he'd do good enough in the suburbs. And Trump does okay in like California, Washington. Also, he's much more liberal, so you don't have like Cascadia swinging to call. You have it swinging to her, but not nearly enough to make Washington under 10. Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, I think is closer. Illinois. You have a lot of these eastern seaboard states, maybe even Maryland. But I think there's a large black population that would keep its margin up just enough. There, you see the rest of the eastern seaboard get closer. Maine, kind of. I think with Collins, I honestly think she do better in the first district. I think the second district remains solid Democrat in the scenario. Like the parties are kind of irrecognizable at this point. I think Collins ends up winning Florida, um, New Mexico, Nevada, uh, Georgia by a likely margin. Trump just really doesn't have that much appeal to Hispanics or suburbanites. Same thing with North Carolina. So she's doing pretty well here so far. New Hampshire, it's also anti-incumbent, so I'd say it's likely. Uh, Trump ends up winning Michigan, Pennsylvania, Delaware. The fact that Delaware, Connecticut, and Rhode Island need to be talked about. Is kind of bad. The margins narrowing there. I was thinking Maine at large ends up likely. We'll leave Maine's first off for now, just because I think a lot of the Portland area and those suburbs end up back in Collins. But Maine narrows a little bit, so you see a lot of narrowing in these safe Republican areas. I'm trying to think about Virginia. I'd say Virginia ends up lean, high lean though, just because you see areas like Loudoun, the Hampton Roads solidify even more for the GOP. I think you see a lot of these Appalachian trends like slow down, not completely stop, but slow down a bit for the GOP. You also see Oregon end up leaning Republican. It's not that great for the GOP in this scenario. It was always going to be a hard hold because the suburbs just become completely toxic um, for Donald Trump. But like the GOP gets a modest win, like 3 to 4% out of Oregon here, which makes the election tied. Then you have Iowa and Ohio end up lean closer than here. Ohio kind of holds. I just don't see the suburbs in Ohio being enough to overwhelm the urban areas, and the rural areas of the rural areas are going to be as Democrat as I think they are in the snare. And I think New Jersey also ends up leaning Democrat. Same thing with Maine's first, which means it comes down to Missouri. If Trump wins Missouri, it ties. Which actually is kind of like our scenario. I think we'll leave New Jersey off for now and have New Jersey be a surprise flip. Woohoo! But also Missouri, I think, ends up flipping. Missouri's like the key bellwether in these scenarios. So you have New Jersey, Missouri, and Oregon end up flipping. It's a very hard hold. For Trump, he puts up a fight, but like the suburban areas just go against him enough that Susan Collins ends up winning the presidency. And I don't think Susan Collins drops out like Biden did in our timeline. I think she stays and fights, but she's okay. It's just Trump at this point is a completely different breed of candidate. Um, Much better slated to appeal to areas like coal country. I just think he's a lot harder for someone like Collins to beat here. He obviously doesn't like flipping on a dime, but he starts to solidify some of these states. Um, Delaware, Rhode Island, maybe not Connecticut, New York, Maine second, and Maine at large end up safe. You kind of see some of that Collins home state uh, benefit decrease. So this is the safe states map. So Donald Trump is already ahead, and Susan Collins fell far behind from 174 to 140. She ends up winning a few of these states by likely margins. Florida, Kentucky. I don't think New Mexico at this point. I think you have a lot of urban areas there, but Nevada, forgot Hawaii. Uh, but you see her do okay. Kentucky, she loses a lot in coal country, but the suburban areas uh, end up holding up her margin. Nevada and Florida is Hispanics. I don't think you have the 2020 or 2024 type realignment with Hispanics where they shift towards Donald Trump. I just really don't think he has that much appeal to them. Uh, by now, the Hillary Clinton policy of like deporting a lot of people unless you're economically contributing to the country is kind of the mainstream. Trump maybe is a little bit further towards deportations, but like not not in an earth shattering way. Um, you also see Trump end up winning states like Iowa, Pennsylvania once again, Connecticut, New Jersey. I'm not sure about that one. Maine's first by likely margins. It just you see a lot of degradation of the Republican vote share, especially in the rural areas of here. You see Trump like lean full force into his rural coalition. Well, Susan Collins does okay in areas like North Carolina, Virginia, um, suburban Oregon. I think would be a tough flip back. Even though in our scenario, Trump flipped back all the states that were flipped in 2020, I think Oregon ends up holding for Democrats. Same thing with New Mexico. Both would be pretty hard. And Louisiana ends up staying Republican. As for leading Democrat, Ohio kind of just completely stagnant throughout. Since 2008, it's just been lean Democrat the entire time. I think you see the suburban and the rural areas counteract each other pretty well across this time period, so it kind of remains stagnant. In a way, what North Carolina is currently, where you see the suburban and rural area and black areas kind of counteract each other. And I think he also ends up flipping back New Jersey. I just, here is kind of a once off because the suburbs are inflamed against it, but like you kind of can't carry that momentum for 4 years. I think you see suburban turnout against Democrats die down a little bit, and urban areas begin to turn out for Democrats a bit more. um, so you see the map stand at this currently. Trying to think where I switched it up here between this and this, because Missouri wouldn't do it, but that's because Oregon. Okay. Um, yeah, think Missouri ends up flipping by a lean margin. It just you see the rural areas completely fall apart for Democrats. You even see some suburban reversion. I could potentially see. These are these wouldn't all be tilt states. I think Indiana's lean Republican. You see, eh, there's not too many working class areas in Indiana. It's been a traditional GOP state for a while for a reason. I think you see New Hampshire barely hold for the GOP just because suburbs. Even though anti-incumbency is a big factor in the state, West Virginia, I think you see in a surprise flip to Trump. He's just become a full populist at this point. Um, he wins a lot of the coal country. Georgia, I'm trying to think. I think black trends end up flipping it to Trump narrowly. Like black trends, you even saw narrow a little bit here with suburban trends being against Trump here between these elections, but it just the floor falls out and Georgia ends up flipping Democrat in the scenario. And Arkansas, kind of good way to cap the scenario. It ends up flipping Democrat just because of that old Hillary Clinton appeal. But anyways, if you like this scenario, comment down below. It's a bit of a longer video. I actually ended up filling out 5 electoral maps. This is kind of the biggest jump. I will admit this might be a hard pill to swallow for some people. And I kind of did rush at the end there, but I don't know. Uh, I thought it was an interesting scenario. Plus, I also wanted to do the Trump stuff, and I thought it was kind of clever for thinking Newt Gingrich in 2012. But yeah, this is kind of what my mind does when it wanders. I thought of most of this on the train ride home. Obviously, not like the specific margin of the state, but like it was planned out that like Trump wins 2016, then loses 2020, and comes back in 2024 because of the different shifts in his coalition. But yeah, if you like this video, comment down below whether you think this is a better scenario for America or a worse scenario for America. Kind of like I said before. There will be a link in the description probably to help donate to my poll of New Jersey. Now, New Jersey is a key swing state here. It also is a key swing state in our timeline. And you can help donate to pull it for the 2025 gubernatorial election. I can also confirm I have new news that will include the Republican primary, the Democrat primary, and hypothetical general elections. So there's a lot of stuff to look forward for that. But you can donate to that. Just $5 would put us a lot closer to meeting our goal. Even though it's a big goal, I think we can do it because this audience is amazing and they've shown me a lot of support. Subscribe, comment, share with your friends, like, all that good stuff. It helps recommend the video to new people. It helps out the channel a lot. Thank you for watching. Godspeed. Tester's done. Out.